The Summers family farmhouse stood proudly in the middle of Marlow, Texas, surrounded by endless fields of golden wheat and patches of dense woods that whispered with the wind. From a distance, it looked like a postcard: white-painted siding, a rusty red barn, and a weathered wooden swing hanging from an old oak tree. Life here moved slowly, measured by the rising and setting of the sun, and the four cousins, Jake, Emily, Mason, and Lily, had grown up believing the farm was their entire world, a sanctuary where nothing bad could ever touch them. Mornings were always lively on the farm. The cousins would wake before sunrise, greeted by the clucking of chickens and the lowing of cows waiting to be fed. They would race barefoot across the dew-covered fields, their laughter carrying through the crisp morning air. Emily loved to pick wildflowers along the edge of the woods, while Jake and Mason would play pretend games in the barn loft, imagining themselves as cowboys and adventurers. Lily, the youngest, would tag along with everyone, clutching her doll tightly, always feeling safe as long as her cousins were around. Afternoons brought the chores, but they were far from tedious. The children helped gather eggs, milk the cows, and collect firewood while their parents worked alongside them. Each task felt like a game, with laughter echoing across the farm. On particularly hot days, the children would dash into the nearby creek to cool off, their giggles mixing with the trickling water. The farm wasn't just a home, it was a playground, a world where imagination ran wild, and the days seemed endless and full of promise. Evenings on the Summers farm were a time for gathering and stories. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the cousins would sit on the porch with their parents, listening to tales of the past, how their grandparents built the farmhouse, how the land had survived droughts and storms, and how the family had always stuck together. Fireflies dotted the fields like tiny stars, and the distant hoot of an owl added a gentle rhythm to the night. The air was warm but carried a faint chill, hinting at the approaching night, yet nothing seemed out of place. Everything on the farm exuded a sense of safety and familiarity. The creaking floorboards, the rustling of corn stalks in the wind, and the familiar smell of hay and earth made it a world the cousins trusted implicitly. To outsiders, the Summers farm was the very picture of rural peace, a place where children could grow and explore without fear. The quiet beauty of the land masked any hint of danger, and the cousins roamed freely, unaware that this idyllic sanctuary was on the brink of a nightmare that would shake their small town forever. It started like any other summer day on the Summers farm. The sun had just begun its climb, casting long shadows over the fields, and the cousins were full of energy. That morning, their parents had asked them to fetch water from the old stone well behind the barn, a task they had done countless times before. Jake, the eldest, led the group with confidence, while Emily carried the small pail, and Mason and Lily trailed behind, chattering about what games they would play later. The air was thick with the smell of fresh hay and the distant scent of wildflowers, masking any hint that something was about to go terribly wrong. As the cousins approached the well, the wind rustled the trees in an unusual rhythm, almost as if the farm itself was holding its breath. The well, a centuries-old structure with cracked stones and moss creeping along its sides, seemed ordinary, but there was a strange stillness that day. Birds that usually filled the air with their songs were silent, and even the farm animals seemed unusually restless. The cousins joked and laughed, but there was a faint unease creeping into the edges of their mourning, subtle enough that only an adult might have noticed. Minutes turned into an hour, and when their parents called for them to return, there was no response. At first, they assumed the children had wandered off to explore the fields or chase a rabbit. But as the sun climbed higher and the shadows grew shorter, panic began to set in. The parents ran toward the barn, shouting the children's names, their voices growing frantic. Mason's little red toy truck lay abandoned by the barn door, and Lily's doll sat eerily on the porch steps, as if someone had just left in a hurry. The sudden absence of the children turned the warm summer day into a growing nightmare. The search began immediately. The family combed through the wheat fields, checked every corner of the barn, and ran along the edges of the surrounding woods, calling for the cousins. Neighbors were alerted, and soon a small group had joined the frantic search. But the more they looked, the stranger it became. There were no footprints, no signs of a struggle, nothing that could explain the sudden disappearance of 4 children who had been together just moments before. The only sound was the wind weaving through the trees, whispering through the empty farm as though mocking the desperate adults. By midday, the entire community of Marlow was aware of the tragedy unfolding on the Summers farm. Police were called, search dogs were brought in, and helicopters hovered above, scanning the fields from the air. Yet, even with the town's combined efforts, there was no trace of Jake, Emily, Mason, or Lily. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the quiet farmhouse, the swaying crops, and a sense of dread that no one could explain. The day that had begun with laughter and sunshine ended with a chilling silence, one that would linger over the farm for years to come. Once the police arrived at the Summers farm, the scene was nothing short of chaotic. Officers cordoned off the property, and search dogs were unleashed to sniff through the fields and barns. Families from nearby farms arrived, hoping to lend a hand, their faces pale with worry. The investigators interviewed everyone, including the parents, neighbors, and even local children, but nobody had seen anything unusual. The farmhouse, usually a place of comfort, now felt like a crime scene, every creak of the wooden floors echoing with the fear of what might have happened. The first search focused on the most obvious places: the barn, the well, and the surrounding woods. Police combed through the wheat fields with meticulous precision, yet found nothing. No footprints beyond the usual animal tracks, no broken branches, no signs of a struggle. Even the farm animals seemed uneasy, moving restlessly as though sensing the tension in the air. Helicopters hovered above, their spotlights cutting through the late afternoon haze, while officers on the ground shouted the children's names, the sound swallowed almost immediately by the vast openness of the farm. Days passed, and the search extended beyond the farm. Ditches, abandoned barns, and nearby streams were scoured, and every road leading away from Marlow was checked for suspicious vehicles or travelers. Volunteers went door to door, asking questions and leaving flyers with the children's photos. Despite the growing community effort, the trail remained cold. No one could explain how 4 children could vanish from a place as familiar and safe as the Summers farm. Even the seasoned investigators were beginning to feel the gnawing unease of a mystery that didn't add up. Rumors began to spread almost immediately. Some townspeople whispered that the cousins had been taken by strangers, perhaps lured away by someone who had been watching them for weeks. Others spoke in hushed tones about something darker, an old curse on the land, spirits in the woods, or a secret long buried beneath the farm. Every shadow seemed to hold a possibility, every rustle in the trees a warning. The small town of Marlow, normally quiet and unassuming, began to buzz with fear and suspicion, unsure who to trust or what to believe. Investigators brought in cadaver dogs, forensic teams, and even experts from neighboring counties, hoping that fresh eyes might see something missed in the initial chaos. They analyzed the soil near the well, the barns, and the edges of the fields, searching for anything out of place: disturbed earth, traces of clothing fibers, even subtle impressions in the grass. Yet every lead ended in frustration. It was as if the cousins had simply been erased from existence, leaving behind only the farmhouse, the farm animals, and a sense of dread that settled like a shadow over Marlow. The investigation was thorough, but the mystery deepened with each passing day. After the initial search ended with no answers, the case of the 4 missing cousins faded from the headlines but never from the minds of Marlow's residents. The Summers farm, once alive with laughter and activity, grew eerily quiet. Fields that had been tended daily were left partially overgrown, and the barn, once filled with the echoes of children's games, creaked ominously in the wind. Locals would sometimes drive past and swear they saw shadows moving near the barn windows at night, fleeting glimpses that vanished before anyone could get a closer look. The town had entered a period of quiet unease, where the memory of that summer day lingered like a dark cloud. Stories began to take on a life of their own. Some neighbors claimed they heard giggles echoing through the wheat fields after dusk, while others reported strange lights flickering in the barn on nights when the moon was full. Rumors circulated that the children had been abducted by someone, or something, that knew the farm intimately. Others whispered of supernatural forces, claiming the woods near the property were cursed or haunted. These stories weren't just idle gossip. They left the townspeople wary, locking doors early, keeping their children close, and avoiding the farm entirely after sunset. Over the next several years, the Summers family struggled with grief, alternating between hope and despair. The parents never stopped searching, following every tip, no matter how far-fetched. Private investigators were hired, psychics consulted, and rewards offered, but every lead turned cold. Even as new generations grew up in Marlow, the story of Jake, Emily, Mason, and Lily remained a ghost of the past, a cautionary tale of how quickly life could shift from normal to nightmare. Friends of the family kept quiet, fearing they might attract the same shadow that had taken the children. The farm itself seemed to hold on to the mystery. Visitors often described an unsettling atmosphere, as if the land remembered what had happened. Objects would go missing only to reappear in odd places, and farm animals were said to behave strangely, refusing to enter certain areas or reacting to invisible presences. Some theorized that the cousins had somehow never left the property, that the earth itself had hidden them away, leaving only their absence to haunt the living. Each unexplained occurrence kept the story alive, feeding a mixture of fear and fascination that gripped the small town for years. Even 20 years later, the memory of that summer day remained vivid in the minds of those who had lived through it. Local children were warned not to wander near the farm alone, and parents spoke in hushed tones when recounting the tale. Every creaking floorboard, every rustle in the wheat, every shadow cast by the old oak tree became a reminder that something was still unresolved. The mystery didn't fade with time. It only deepened, leaving Marlowe with a sense of quiet dread and a lingering question. What had really happened to the four cousins, and why did the farm seem unwilling to let them go? It was the summer of 2023 when the Summers farmhouse, long abandoned and shrouded in overgrown weeds, was finally being renovated by a distant relative. The town of Marlowe had almost forgotten the property existed, and the mystery of the four missing cousins seemed to have slipped into legend. But as workers cleared out the old barn, something strange caught their eyes, an arrangement of clothes that appeared carefully folded, neatly stacked, and unmistakably small, meant for children. At first, they assumed it was left behind by the family decades ago, but the way the garments were placed suggested something deliberate, almost ritualistic. The items were immediately recognizable to the locals: a faded blue shirt that must have belonged to Jake, a small floral dress that matched the one Emily had worn the last summer she was seen, tiny overalls for Mason, and a pair of tiny shoes that had once belonged to Lily. Every piece looked untouched by time, the fabric surprisingly preserved despite 2 decades of exposure. The discovery sent a shockwave through the family, the town, and eventually the authorities. How could the clothes have appeared now, so perfectly preserved, and so eerily placed? It was a puzzle that immediately reignited old fears and dark speculation. News of the find spread like wildfire, drawing journalists, true crime enthusiasts, and curious onlookers to the Summers farm. Some reported a strange chill in the air as they approached the barn, as if the property itself was aware of the attention. Others swore they saw shadows flit past the windows, too fast to be human. For 20 years, the farm had been silent, but the sudden reappearance of the children's belongings gave the eerie impression that someone, or something, was still very much present. The farm, which had seemed abandoned and lifeless, had once again become a center of mystery and fear. Authorities were quick to return to the scene, reopening the case with renewed urgency. Forensic teams meticulously photographed the clothes, collecting soil samples from the barn floor and examining every thread for clues. Yet, even with modern technology, the evidence only deepened the mystery. There were faint footprints in the dust surrounding the clothes, but they didn't match any adult or child in the family. Fibers from the garments hinted at movement, but nothing concrete. It was as if the cousins had vanished once again, this time leaving behind not only their absence, but a haunting, cryptic message. Locals began to speculate wildly, their imaginations fueled by decades of unanswered questions. Some whispered that the farm itself had been the culprit, hiding the children in some hidden chamber or secret passage that no one had ever discovered. Others spoke of darker forces, suggesting that the clothes had been left as a sign, a haunting reminder that the children's spirits, or something else entirely, were still present. As the sun set over the old farmhouse, casting long shadows across the barn floor, the scene looked almost staged, as if someone had paused time and left these artifacts for the world to stumble upon. The discovery reopened wounds, stirred fear, and left everyone wondering if the cousins had ever truly left the farm at all. The reappearance of the children's clothes sent shockwaves through Marlowe, and it wasn't long before the authorities reopened the cold case. Police from the local precinct, joined by state investigators, returned to the Summers farm with a renewed sense of urgency. Forensics teams combed the barn and surrounding fields with a precision that wasn't available 20 years ago, using advanced imaging, ground-penetrating radar, and dust analysis in the hope of uncovering anything the original investigators might have missed. Every inch of the property was scanned for hidden clues, from the cracks in the barn floor to the depths of the old well, but each finding seemed to lead to more questions rather than answers. As the investigation progressed, subtle but unsettling details began to emerge. Soil samples taken from around the folded clothes revealed traces of materials not native to the area, raising the possibility that someone had deliberately brought items from elsewhere and placed them here. Footprints, faint and incomplete, were discovered in the dust, suggesting movement but no clear direction. Investigators also noted odd abrasions on the barn walls, as if something, or someone, had scraped along them. Every clue hinted at activity, but nothing could definitively explain what had happened to the four cousins. The police also turned to interviews and background checks, digging into the histories of people who had once lived nearby or had connections to the farm. Some of the older residents spoke of strange occurrences long before the disappearance, missing animals, odd lights at night, or sounds that couldn't be explained. Others admitted that they had seen unknown vehicles parked near the farm in the early 2000s, but could provide no solid leads. Law enforcement struggled to separate fact from decades-old rumors. But even with new technology and fresh eyes, the investigation remained shrouded in uncertainty. Psychologists and criminal profilers were brought in to offer insight into the mysterious placement of the clothes. Some suggested it might have been a psychological message, a deliberate attempt to evoke fear and mystery. Others speculated that it could be connected to someone with long-standing knowledge of the farm and its hidden corners. Paranormal experts were also consulted, especially after multiple reports from locals about hearing whispers and seeing flickering lights in the barn at night. Every perspective opened a new avenue of speculation, yet none provided definitive answers. As the investigation unfolded, the sense of unease around the Summers farm grew stronger. Every day brought new media attention and new theories, but the central question remained: where were Jake, Emily, Mason, and Lily? The barn, once just a building, had become a symbol of unsolved terror and haunting mystery. The authorities continued their meticulous work, retracing the steps of the past while scanning for evidence that might finally unravel the decades-long disappearance. Yet even as cameras and sensors scoured the property, the air seemed heavier, charged with the unresolved tension of 20 years of silence, leaving investigators, and the town itself, on edge, desperate for answers that still felt just out of reach. Even after 2 decades, the disappearance of Jake, Emily, Mason, and Lily continues to haunt the town of Marlow. The Summers farm, once a lively and beloved property, now sits as a chilling reminder of what was lost. Locals drive past in silence, avoiding the overgrown fields and the looming barn that seems to whisper with unseen presence. The stories of strange noises, fleeting shadows, and flickering lights have persisted, evolving into urban legends that are shared in hushed tones by parents warning their children. The farm has become more than a location. It is a symbol of unanswered questions and lingering dread. Visitors to the farm report a profound sense of unease, describing the feeling that they are being watched, even when no one else is around. Some claim to hear the faint laughter of children carried on the wind, while others insist that the barn doors creak open and close on their own. Shadows appear in the corners of vision, disappearing the moment one tries to focus on them. Every sound, every movement, even the rustling of leaves in the evening breeze, seems charged with the memory of that summer day in 2003. The mystery has a life of its own, refusing to fade despite the passage of time. The town has grown around the legend, yet the case never truly left the collective memory of the community. Families speak of it with caution, and the disappearance has left a mark on multiple generations. Teenagers dare one another to approach the barn at night, only to return pale and trembling, recounting glimpses of tiny figures moving between the shadows. The farm itself seems to resist explanation, an enigma that straddles the line between reality and something far darker. No official records can explain the paranormal experiences, yet every account adds weight to the eerie reputation of the property. Speculation continues to fuel the fear. Some believe the children were hidden in a secret part of the farm, perhaps an underground chamber or forgotten attic space, while others argue that they were taken by someone who knew the land better than anyone else. There are even whispers of supernatural involvement, suggesting the farm may have become a kind of portal or trap, holding the children suspended somewhere between this world and the next. Whatever the truth, the lack of answers leaves room for imagination and terror to flourish. Even today, the 4 cousins remain missing, their absence haunting every corner of Marlow. The clothes that appeared in 2023 only added to the chilling uncertainty, as if the farm, or whatever force resides there, is sending a reminder that the story is far from over. Parents remain vigilant, and the community continues to observe the property from a distance, wary of disturbing the restless presence that seems to linger on the land. Every creaking floorboard, every flicker of light, and every whisper of wind serves as a reminder that the mystery endures, leaving an indelible mark on the town and ensuring that the legend of the missing cousins will never be forgotten. As the sun sets over the Summers farm, casting long shadows across the overgrown fields, one thing remains clear. The mystery of Jake, Emily, Mason, and Lily is far from solved. Their clothes may have reappeared, their presence may still linger in whispers and flickering lights, but the children themselves are nowhere to be found. The farm stands as a silent sentinel, holding its secrets tightly, as if daring anyone to uncover what truly happened. Some say the answers lie buried beneath the soil, hidden in the shadows of the barn, or trapped in the wind that rustles through the wheat. Others fear the truth may be far stranger, something beyond human understanding, something that refuses to let go. The town of Marlow watches from a distance, forever haunted by the memory of that fateful summer, and every visitor feels it, the unsettling sense that they are not alone, that the farm is alive in ways no one can explain. Perhaps, one day, the mystery will be solved. Perhaps the cousins will finally be found, and the silence will be broken. Or perhaps the farm will continue to guard its secret, leaving generations to wonder, to speculate, and to fear. For now, the Summers farm remains a place of unanswered questions, a chilling reminder that sometimes, the past refuses to let go, and some mysteries are meant to linger forever. And as you leave this story behind, remember this: if you ever find yourself near an abandoned farm, and you hear the faintest echo of children's laughter on the wind, stop. Look around. Because sometimes, the past is closer than you think, and some secrets are better left undisturbed.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.